Hi everyone, how's it going? Well, today I'm going to talk about the 1983 film WarGames, another one of those touchstones of 80s movies, a really popular movie when it came out in the spring of 1983 and continues to be referenced, I think, up to this day. It was one of the first movies to depict computer hacking. It's a Cold War thriller, a techno-thriller, but also when you're having two teenage protagonists with Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, it's also a movie that would appeal to younger audiences as well. So it's really a unique movie that blends genres together. It's very savvy when it comes to depicting technology on film. It's just a well-made film all around. Okay, I should talk a little bit about the Cold War context of the film. Like in 1983, fear of nuclear war was really hitting a fever pitch as relations were not great between the Soviet Union and the United States, and that was reflected in pop culture with movies like The Day After, which was a TV movie that aired, I think, later in '83, which was about the effects of a nuclear war on a small town. Movies like Threads and Testament and others were, really grim, really heavy movies that were, fostering discussions about international politics and things like that. And but War Games took a somewhat different approach, though. I think it took a lot of this anxiety and made it into a popcorn movie that was just really well made, but thought provoking at the same time. I should also mention this is when you had the nuclear freeze movement, which was a movement against nuclear weapons and opposing, building more weapons and even pushing for removing the weapons altogether because of the threat that they posed. Not that that's been whitewashed from the 1980s, but it often doesn't come up that there was a real vibrant movement to push for more arms control and that too. And sometimes I thought he mentioned it. Sometimes that's left out of the discussion, but that's a little bit of context for War Games. Also, one of the first movies to depict the internet, the early form of the internet, hacker culture, the idea of dialing with a phone and you could connect other computers on the phone and communicate with each other. That was such a novel thing in 1983 that really just a small community of people knew about, or it was really abstract to general audiences. Okay. And I should mention video games too. I talked about that with Tron, how video game culture, and that's also, I think, part of what makes War Games, I think, a fun movie, and also appealing to the younger audience market, where you have two young leads with Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy in the film. So like there's a scene, like in Tron, there's a scene at the arcade, and so there's just so many. The Cold War stuff of the '80s, but all the technological stuff, and you add in kind of a teenage movie into that. It was just a really great formula for a movie that really on the surface looks like, how can you have a Cold War thriller and tech stuff and all this, but it worked. The movie really holds up well and works well, decades later. So just a little bit about the plot of the film. There's Matthew Broderick, an underachieving high school student who is kind of obsessed with hacking into systems and computers and getting access to video games. Ali Sheedy plays a classmate of his who kind of takes an interest in Matthew and what he's up to with the computer, and of course like a scene where he can change grades and hack into the school system, stuff that seems really trite these days, but that was definitely a thing then. and he accidentally hacks into the computer that controls the nuclear arsenal of the United States. In the film, it's called the Whopper, computer, which directs strategy in case of nuclear attack or anything like that. And he gets into it under the guise of playing a game called Thermonuclear War, which sounds like a cool video game, but doesn't realize that this is affecting real world events. As soon as he hacks into the system at NORAD at Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, I believe, there's warnings of a Soviet missile attack coming in, and they quickly realize it's not real, it's a fake. So the film raises great questions like that about dependence on computers to control these really complex weapon systems. Dr. Strangelove dealt with that in the 1960s in a somewhat more satirical way. Strangelove is more about, you know, the personalities in charge of the technology, but WarGames is more just about all this high-tech stuff and what if it glitches or goes wrong, right? And the film depicts the government and military personnel in a respectful way. I mean, it's not like Doctor Strangelove, where it's more of a satire of things like that. But you know, like Dabney Coleman is in here, who's great as a strategist at NORAD, and Barry Corbin as the general, who is, you know, kind of a character, but he's also level-headed and responsible and about his job and everything. So that's an interesting change too. And there's really no villain in the movie. Like, we don't see Russians or the Soviet Union. It's not like this was some Soviet plot or anything. So it's really focused on the technology going wrong, where the computer thinks it has to play this game out, and only it's going to, you know, do it in the real world, not in the world of the computer. So it's a very easy concept, I think, for audiences to understand. We have John Wood in here, who's really great as Professor Falcon, who was interesting character who designed the computer systems, the defense systems, and then went missing for a number of years, and he comes into the story as the computer genius who can understand Joshua, as he calls the computer, and try to figure out a way to stop it from launching the missiles. So he brings a real, I think, conscience to the movie, which works. Like, there's a great scene where Ali Sheedy and Matthew Broderick are on the run, and they manage to track Falcon down, and he kind of lives on this really remote island, and he shows them. Initially, he doesn't want to help because he feels like nuclear war is inevitable anyway. You know, it's just a matter of time before it happens. And he's talking about the dinosaurs and how they went extinct. And, you know, the nuclear weapons are a sign that maybe it's humanity's time that eventually will disappear and another species will come up in its place. I always like that scene. I always think it's really well written, profound scene. Of course, he has a change of heart, and, you know, goes in and tries to help to save the day. And of course, the resolution is really great. How it comes down to tic-tac-toe and trying to teach the computer, you know, a lesson if humans can do that. So just a really good movie that. It's well paced, especially in the last half hour is really intense and fast paced and things like that. And, you know, I think it was one of those movies of the 80s that everyone kind of liked. You know, it was just it was able to tap into people's anxieties, but not like in this really overly depressing way, which. And there's a place for that. I think if movies, especially on that issue of nuclear weapons, should scare people, because that can lead to change. You know, maybe that's naive, but maybe it can. You know, and there is a little bit of that idealism in this movie that possibly, you know, we can overcome these weapons. But anyway, and I think how this movie plays today, like, I showed it to students, and it never really hit well with students. Maybe because I mean, like 20-year-olds, where I guess maybe it's just a generational thing, not growing up in a Cold War type climate, and maybe it feels dated, so dated, because it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like how we looked at if you're growing up in the 80s and then watching like a World War II thriller about radar or something, it might be a good movie, might be fun, but it feels so distant. So that could be, but nevertheless, it's a quotable movie. You'll hear it come up. How about a nice game of chess is quoted a lot, and there's a lot of things in it. And I should mention the Martin Brest, who was the original director of the film, and he was actually fired from the film for they felt his approach was too serious, and he was removed from the picture. But it was all good because Brest went on to direct Beverly Hills Cop, which would become the biggest hit of 1984. So it all worked out, and John Badham was brought in to bring a little bit more lightness and humor to it, which really worked. And Badham had directed Saturday Night Fever, and he had done the Dracula movie, and just one of the great journeyman directors, and he really would have a string of hits through the 80s. So he really like I said, he really kind of brought that pop sensibility to the movie. I think that really made it all come together. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a trivia on the making of the film. And the script writers, I know the script went through a lot of rewrites, but the initial script was written by their names, Lawrence Lasker and Walter F. Parks, who would also go on to do another techno-thriller on Sneakers in the 90s, which is another really kind of a natural follow-up to WarGames, and I'll probably talk about Sneakers when I come to it. So yeah, WarGames, just if you've never seen it, highly recommend it. If you like 80s science fiction techno-thriller type movies, it's a lot of fun, but it's serious at the same time. It's just well made. The music score is really good. Kind of has a typical 80s synth score by Arthur B. Rubinstein, and it's well paced. The sets are great. The NORAD set is really iconic as far as how it looks, and yeah. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on WarGames. If you have any memories or thoughts on the film, I'd be great to hear them. But until then, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.